The moment Lena's hand touched mine across that birthday table, I knew my carefully constructed world was about to shatter. For 3 years, I'd been the dependable brother-in-law, the helpful uncle, the man who fixed broken faucets and never crossed lines. But that night, with candlelight flickering between us and my daughter asleep upstairs, Lena whispered 4 words that would destroy everything I'd built to protect us. I've fallen for you. In small-town Wyoming, some secrets stay buried, others explode. Before you judge what happened next, hear my story to the end. Hit that like button and comment your city. I want to know how far this truth travels. The fluorescent lights of Anderson's Hardware hummed their familiar tune as Caleb Moore ran inventory on aisle 7. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, counting boxes of 3-inch deck screws, noting the depleted stock of weatherproof sealant, marking items that needed reordering before the spring construction season hit full force. It was Tuesday, which meant the afternoon shift would drag until 4:30, giving him exactly 17 minutes to reach Riverside Elementary before the late pickup fee kicked in. 17 minutes. Not 16. Not 18. 17 was the sweet spot he'd calculated over 2 years of single fatherhood, accounting for traffic lights, the train crossing on Maple Street, and Mrs. Henderson's tendency to keep the school doors locked until precisely 3:45. "Caleb, you got a minute?" His boss, Martin Anderson, stood at the end of the aisle, holding a clipboard and wearing the expression he always wore before asking Caleb to cover someone's shift. Caleb had learned to recognize that look, apologetic but expectant, banking on the fact that Caleb Moore never said no. "Depends on the minute," Caleb replied, setting down his scanner. "I've got pickup in an hour. Jake called in sick again, 3rd time this month." Martin scratched his gray beard. "I know it's last minute, but could you stay until close, just tonight? I'll make it worth your while, time and a half." Caleb's jaw tightened. Time and a half meant nothing when weighed against his daughter's face, waiting at that school window, watching other kids leave while she stayed behind. But Martin was a good man who'd hired him when other employers had hesitated, seeing a 28-year-old single father as a liability rather than an asset. "Can't do it, Martin. Not tonight. Sophie's got a project due tomorrow, and I promised I'd help her with the poster board." Right. No problem." Martin nodded, already scanning the store for someone else. "Kid comes first, always." The words were meant kindly, but they settled over Caleb like the weight they were. Kid comes first, always. It was his mantra, his North Star, the principle that governed every decision since the day his brother died, and Caleb became the only father figure in Sophie's life, even though she wasn't technically his daughter. Technically. That word did a lot of heavy lifting. At 3:43, Caleb pulled his aging Ford F-150 into the elementary school parking lot. The truck had 200,000 miles on it and a passenger door that stuck in humid weather, but it ran, and that was what mattered. He'd learned to measure everything in his life by that standard. Does it work? Does it serve its purpose? Does it get us through another day? Sophie burst through the school doors at 3:46, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, dark braids flying. At 7 years old, she was all energy and questions, a stark contrast to Caleb's measured silence. She spotted the truck and waved enthusiastically, nearly tripping over her untied shoelace in the process. "Careful," Caleb called through the open window. She yanked open the passenger door. It took 2 tries, and climbed inside, immediately launching into a breathless monologue about her day. "We had art class and Mrs. Peterson said my drawing of the mountains was really good, and can I use the nice markers for my project tonight? And Emma invited me to her birthday party on Saturday, but I said I had to ask you first and—" "Seatbelt," Caleb interrupted gently. Sophie clicked the belt into place without pausing. "And can I go to Emma's party? Her mom said it's at the rec center and they're going to have pizza and—" "We'll talk about it at home," Caleb said, pulling out of the parking lot. "How was the math test?" Her enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Okay, I guess. There was this one-word problem about trains that was really hard. We can practice those tonight after the project." "You always say we can practice." Sophie looked out the window at the passing storefronts, the diner with the crooked sign, the post office with its faded flag, the church with the bulletin board advertising a community potluck. "But sometimes I just want to watch TV. TV doesn't help you pass 2nd grade. Emma watches TV every night, and she gets good grades." Caleb gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. These conversations were becoming more frequent, Sophie comparing her life to her friends' lives, finding his rules too strict, his schedule too rigid. He knew what she was really asking. Why can't we be normal? Why can't you be like other dads? Because other dads didn't carry the weight he carried. Because other dads weren't raising their dead brother's child while trying to honor a promise made in a hospital room 3 years ago. We're not Emma's family, Caleb said quietly. We do what works for us. The house was a small 2-bedroom rental on the east side of town, where the roads turned from asphalt to gravel and neighbors measured distance in acres rather than feet. It wasn't much. Peeling paint on the shutters, a porch that sagged slightly on the left side, a yard that was more dirt than grass. But it was theirs. Caleb had negotiated a lease-to-own agreement with the landlord, making payments he could barely afford because Sophie needed stability. She needed to know that this place, imperfect as it was, wouldn't disappear. Inside, the house smelled like the pine cleaner Caleb used every Sunday and the faint mustiness of old carpet. Sophie dropped her backpack by the door, a habit Caleb had tried and failed to break, and headed straight for the kitchen. Snack first, she announced, then project. Apple or carrots? Can I have the crackers? Those are for lunches. You always say that. Because it's always true. She settled for an apple, eating it at the kitchen table while Caleb unpacked her backpack, checking for notes from teachers or permission slips he needed to sign. There was a flyer for the spring carnival, a reminder about the upcoming parent-teacher conference, and, tucked at the bottom, a small envelope with his name written in familiar handwriting. His chest tightened. The envelope was cream-colored, sealed with a small sticker shaped like a daisy. Even before opening it, Caleb knew who it was from. Only one person in his life still sent handwritten notes instead of texts. He slid his finger under the flap carefully, not wanting to tear the paper. Caleb, I hope this finds you well. I know we just saw each other on Sunday, but I wanted to ask you something in person, or at least in writing since I keep losing my nerve on the phone. It's my birthday next Saturday. Nothing big, just a small dinner at my place. Sophie's invited too, of course. I'm making that pot roast you always liked. Would mean a lot if you both could come. No pressure either way. Lena. He read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope. Who's that from? Sophie had finished her apple and was watching him with curious eyes. Aunt Lena. She's inviting us to dinner on Saturday. Sophie's face lit up. Can we go? Please? I love Aunt Lena's house, and she makes really good cookies. It's her birthday dinner, Soph. Might be boring for you. Lots of adult conversation. I don't care. I want to go. She bounced in her seat. And I can make her a card. With glitter. She loves glitter. Caleb looked down at the envelope again, at the careful loops of Lena's handwriting. No pressure either way. But there was pressure, wasn't there? There was always pressure when it came to Lena. The pressure of history, of shared grief, of a relationship neither of them had ever properly defined. She was his late brother's widow. That should have been the end of the story. But it wasn't. We'll go, Caleb heard himself say. But you're on your best behavior. No running in the house, no arguing about bedtime. I'm always on my best behavior at Aunt Lena's, Sophie said indignantly. Then, more honestly, mostly. They spent the next 2 hours on her school project, a poster about Wyoming wildlife. Sophie drew careful pictures of elk and moose while Caleb looked up facts on his laptop, reading them aloud for her to copy in her round, uneven handwriting. These were his favorite moments, when the chaos of single parenthood gave way to something calmer, when Sophie was focused and happy and the weight on his shoulders felt just a little bit lighter. At 7, he made dinner, spaghetti with jarred sauce, the same meal he made every Tuesday because it was fast and cheap and Sophie would actually eat it. They ate in front of the TV, a rule Caleb had held firm on for months before gradually relaxing, realizing that some battles weren't worth fighting. Sophie chattered about the birthday party again, making her case with the persistence of a trained lawyer. Emma's mom already said yes, so she's expecting me, and I already told Emma I'd probably come. And I don't have anything else to do on Saturday except Aunt Lena's dinner, but that's at night, and the party's at 2, so I could do both. Caleb twirled spaghetti around his fork, considering. Birthday parties meant presents, which meant money he hadn't budgeted for. But they also meant Sophie building friendships, having normal childhood experiences, being something other than the girl whose dad said no to everything. $15 limit on the present, he said finally. And we're not staying for the whole thing. I'll pick you up after an hour. 2 hours? Hour and a half. Final offer. Sophie grinned, victorious. Deal. After dinner, after bath time, after the elaborate bedtime routine that involved 2 stories, a glass of water, and a check under the bed for monsters, Caleb finally had silence. He sat on the porch with a beer he didn't really want, looking out at the dark expanse of Wyoming sky. The stars were spectacular out here, away from city lights, scattered across the blackness like diamonds on velvet. His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. Got my note? No pressure, just thought it would be nice. He typed back, We'll be there. What can I bring? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Just yourselves. That's enough. Caleb stared at those words longer than he should have. Just yourselves. That's enough. There was something weighted in that phrase, something that made his stomach twist with a feeling he'd been working very hard to ignore for the past 6 months. He deleted his reply 3 times before settling on, See you Saturday. The week passed in its usual rhythm. Work, school pickup, homework, dinner, bedtime. Caleb fixed a leaking faucet for their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who paid him in cash and homemade dumplings. He took Sophie to the library on Thursday, where she checked out 4 books about horses despite having no horse and no prospect of ever owning one. On Friday, Martin asked him to stay late again, and again Caleb said no. And again Martin nodded with understanding that felt like judgment. Saturday arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Caleb spent the morning cleaning the house, not because it needed it, but because cleaning was something he could control. He vacuumed corners that didn't have dirt, wiped down surfaces that were already clean, organized the junk drawer that would be messy again by Monday. Sophie worked on Lena's birthday card at the kitchen table, surrounded by markers and glitter glue and construction paper. She was meticulous in her creativity, drawing flowers and hearts, and a surprisingly detailed portrait of Lena in her garden. When she finished, the card was more glitter than paper, guaranteed to shed sparkles across Lena's entire house. She's going to love it, Sophie declared, holding it up proudly. She will, Caleb agreed. Lena loved everything Sophie made with a fierce, genuine affection that sometimes made Caleb's chest ache with gratitude. In the aftermath of losing his brother, Lena could have walked away from all of them. Instead, she'd stayed woven into their lives, showing up for Sophie's school plays and skinned knees, never missing a birthday or holiday. She'd been there when Caleb had no idea what he was doing. She'd taught him how to braid Sophie's hair, how to talk to teachers, how to handle the nightmares that had plagued Sophie for months after the funeral. She'd been a co-parent without the title, a partner without the definition. And somewhere along the way, something had shifted. At Emma's birthday party, Caleb stood against the wall of the recreation center, watching Sophie bounce in the inflatable castle with a group of screaming 7-year-olds. The noise was overwhelming, children shrieking, parents chatting loudly over the chaos, pop music blaring from a speaker someone had set up in the corner. Emma's mother, Jennifer, approached with a smile and a juice box. You look like you could use something stronger than this. I'll survive, Caleb said, taking the juice box anyway. Sophie's having a great time. She talks about you constantly, you know? My dad said this, my dad did that. You're her hero. The words landed wrong like they always did. He wasn't Sophie's dad, not really. He was her uncle, stepping into a role he'd never asked for, trying his best not to screw up a child who'd already lost too much. I just do what needs doing, he said. Well, you're doing a great job. Single parenting isn't easy. Trust me, I know. Jennifer's smile turned sympathetic. Sophie's lucky to have you. Caleb nodded, not trusting himself to speak. These conversations always went the same way, people praising him for doing the bare minimum, for not abandoning a child who had no one else. As if love was something deserving of a medal instead of a basic human responsibility. He picked Sophie up after exactly 90 minutes, as promised. She was sweaty and happy, clutching a goodie bag full of candy she wouldn't be allowed to eat until after dinner. That was so fun, she said in the truck. Emma's mom said I was really good at musical chairs. That's great, honey. Are we going to Aunt Lena's now? Caleb checked the dashboard clock. 4:30. Lena had said dinner at 6. We've got time. Need to stop home first, get you cleaned up. But I want to see Aunt Lena. You will. In an hour and a half. Sophie slumped in her seat, the classic portrait of childhood impatience. That's forever. It wasn't forever. But as Caleb drove home through the gray afternoon, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon, an hour and a half felt both too long and not nearly long enough. There was a knot forming in his stomach, a tension he couldn't name, a sense that tonight would be different somehow. He told himself he was being ridiculous. This was Lena, safe, familiar Lena. They'd had dozens of dinners together over the past 3 years. This was just another birthday, another meal, another evening of comfortable conversation and shared history. But that note would mean a lot if you both could come. And that text, just yourselves. That's enough. Caleb had spent 3 years reading between Lena's lines, interpreting her silences, understanding the things she didn't say. He'd become an expert in the language of grief and restraint, in the careful distance that protected them both from crossing a line neither could uncross. Tonight, for reasons he couldn't explain, that distance felt thinner. At home, he showered and changed into the one nice shirt he owned, a blue button-down Sophie had picked out for him last Christmas. Sophie changed into her favorite dress, the purple one with the twirly skirt, and insisted on wearing her dress shoes even though Caleb knew she'd complain about them being uncomfortable within the hour. He wrapped Lena's present, a new gardening book he'd ordered online and a gift certificate to the nursery in town. Practical gifts. Safe gifts. The kind of presents you gave to a friend, to family, to someone who occupied a clearly defined space in your life. The drive to Lena's house took 12 minutes. Caleb knew because he'd made this drive hundreds of times over the years. First as his brother's wingman, then as a pallbearer, then as the man who showed up to fix things and check in and make sure she was okay. Lena lived in the house she'd shared with Caleb's brother, a modest ranch-style home on 3 acres at the edge of town. She'd talked about selling it after the funeral, about moving somewhere with fewer memories, but she'd never followed through. Instead, she'd painted the walls, planted a garden, turned grief into something livable. Her truck was in the driveway. Lights glowed warmly in the windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. "Come on, come on!" Sophie was already unbuckling her seatbelt before Caleb had fully parked. "Wait for me," he said automatically. They walked to the front door together, Sophie clutching her glitter card. Before Caleb could knock, the door swung open, and there was Lena, backlit by the warm interior light, wearing jeans and a soft green sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. "You came," she said, and there was something in her voice, relief, maybe, or nervousness, that made Caleb's throat tight. "Of course we came," Sophie said, pushing past both adults. "Happy birthday. I made you a card and it has glitter and everything." Lena laughed, accepting the card with appropriate reverence. "It's beautiful. I'm going to put it on the mantel right now." Caleb stepped inside, and the smell hit him immediately. Pot roast, exactly as promised, along with fresh bread and something sweet baking in the oven. The house was warm, almost too warm, and he shrugged off his jacket while Lena hung it in the closet. "You look nice," she said quietly. Sophie picked the shirt. "She has good taste." There was a pause, the kind that used to be comfortable, but now felt charged with something Caleb didn't want to examine too closely. Sophie had already made herself at home, sprawled on the living room rug with Lena's cat, Milo. The house was decorated for the occasion, not lavishly but thoughtfully. Candles on the dining table, a small vase of wildflowers, 2 place settings at the table instead of the usual 3. Caleb's stomach dropped. "Is anyone else coming?" Lena was in the kitchen, checking the roast. "No, just us. Is that okay?" "Yeah, of course. I just thought that I'd have a whole party." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm not really a party person. You know that." He did know that. He knew a lot of things about Lena. How she took her coffee, black with 1 sugar. How she hummed when she was nervous. How she'd reorganized the entire house after the funeral, unable to stand things being where David had left them. David, Caleb's older brother. The ghost in the room they'd both gotten very good at not mentioning. "Can I help with anything?" Caleb asked. "You can open the wine. Glasses are in the usual spot." They moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, a domestic choreography they'd developed over years of shared meals. Caleb poured wine while Lena pulled the roast from the oven. Sophie wandered in and out, playing with Milo, chattering about the birthday party and Emma's new bike, and how she really wanted a kitten even though Caleb had said no 17 times. "Maybe your dad will change his mind," Lena said, catching Caleb's eye with a slight smile. "Don't encourage her," he muttered. Dinner was served at 6:30. The pot roast was perfect, tender and rich, falling apart at the touch of a fork. Lena had made all of Caleb's favorites: roasted potatoes with rosemary, green beans with garlic, homemade rolls that were still warm from the oven. It was the kind of meal that took hours to prepare, the kind of effort that spoke louder than words. Sophie dominated the conversation, as she always did, telling Lena every detail of her week. Lena listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, laughing at Sophie's dramatic retellings of playground conflicts and classroom drama. Caleb watched them together, the easy affection between them, and felt the familiar ache of gratitude mixed with something more complicated. Sophie deserved this, a woman in her life who showed up, who cared, who filled the space her mother had left empty from birth. After dinner, Sophie helped Lena cut the birthday cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, and they sang off-key together. Sophie insisted Lena make a wish before blowing out the candles, and Caleb watched Lena's face as she closed her eyes, wondering what she wished for. When she opened her eyes, she was looking right at him. At 8, Sophie started yawning. Caleb recognized the signs. She'd crash hard soon, the combined sugar and excitement too much for her 7-year-old system to handle. "Bedtime's calling," he said gently. "Can I sleep here?" Sophie asked immediately. "In the guest room like before?" Caleb opened his mouth to say no, but Lena cut in. "If your dad says it's okay, I'd love to have you. I put fresh sheets on the bed this morning, just in case." Sophie turned pleading eyes on Caleb. "Please? Please? I already have my toothbrush in my backpack." She'd planned this. Or Lena had planned this. Or they'd both planned this together. A conspiracy Caleb hadn't seen coming. "School night tomorrow," he said weakly. "I'll get her up early," Lena promised. "And I'm going right past the school on my way to work anyway. I can drop her off." He should say no. He had a routine, a schedule, a carefully constructed system that kept their lives running smoothly. Deviations led to chaos, and chaos led to mistakes, and mistakes led to, "Okay," he heard himself say, "but bedtime in 30 minutes, teeth brushed, no arguments." Sophie squealed and hugged him hard enough to knock the breath from his chest. Then she ran to the guest room, already listing all the things she needed to do before bed. And just like that, Caleb was alone with Lena. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of Sophie rummaging through her backpack. Lena started clearing the table, and Caleb helped, carrying plates to the kitchen, scraping leftovers into containers, falling into the same domestic rhythm they'd established years ago. "You didn't have to do all this," Caleb said, washing dishes while Lena dried. "I wanted to. I like cooking for you, for both of you. Still, it's a lot of work for a birthday dinner. Maybe I had ulterior motives." The words hung in the air. Caleb's hands stilled in the soapy water. "What kind of motives?" he asked, keeping his voice light. Lena set down the dish she was drying. "The kind where I get you alone for more than 5 minutes." His heart was beating too fast. "Lena, I need to talk to you, Caleb. Really talk to you. Not surface stuff, not how's work and Sophie's doing great talk." She turned to face him fully. "We've been dancing around something for months, and I can't keep pretending I don't notice." He pulled his hands from the water, dried them on a towel. Every instinct screamed at him to deflect, to change the subject, to check on Sophie even though she was fine. "I don't know what you mean," he said. "Yes, you do." She was right. He did know. He'd known since the day she'd showed up at his house with groceries when he'd had the flu, had stayed to make soup, had sat beside him on the couch watching terrible daytime TV, and he'd realized with startling clarity that he wanted her to stay forever. He'd known when she'd taught him how to braid Sophie's hair, her hands guiding his, her breath warm on his neck. He'd known at last year's 4th of July picnic when she'd laughed at his terrible jokes and looked at him like he was more than just her dead husband's brother. He'd known, and he'd buried it deep, because knowing was dangerous. "I should check on Sophie," he said. She's fine. She's probably already building a fort out of the pillows. Lena stepped closer. Stay. Talk to me. About what? About us. About this. She gestured between them. About the fact that we can't seem to be in the same room anymore without all this tension, this energy, this... There's no us, Lena. His voice came out harder than intended. There's you and me and Sophie, and we're family, and that's family. She said the word like it tasted bitter. Is that what you tell yourself? It's the truth. It's a convenient lie. Her eyes flashed. We've been more than family for a while now, and you know it. Sophie's voice floated from the guest room. Dad? Can you come tuck me in? Caleb seized the escape like a lifeline. Be right there, honey. He moved past Lena, careful not to touch her, and went to Sophie's temporary room. She was already in bed, the covers pulled up to her chin, wearing the pajamas she'd apparently packed with premeditated precision. You planned this, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Planned what? The sleepover. Sophie's grin was unrepentant. Aunt Lena said I should ask you. She said sometimes you need a push. A push toward what? I don't know. Adult stuff. She yawned. Are you and Aunt Lena fighting? No, honey, we're not fighting. Good, because I want you to be happy. The words hit him square in the chest. I am happy. You're always worried. That's not the same thing. Sophie's eyes were already drooping. I just want you to smile more, like how you smile when Aunt Lena's around. He kissed her forehead, tucked the blankets tighter around her small body. Go to sleep, troublemaker. Love you, Dad. Love you too. When he returned to the living room, Lena was sitting on the couch, her hands wrapped around a glass of wine she hadn't drunk. The candles had burned lower. Outside, the threatened rain had started, a soft patter against the windows. Caleb stood in the doorway, every muscle tense, ready to make an excuse and leave. But Lena looked up at him with an expression so raw, so vulnerable, that he couldn't move. I'm not asking for anything you can't give, she said quietly. But I can't keep pretending, Caleb. I can't keep acting like we're just friends, just family, just two people connected by tragedy and responsibility. What are we then? I don't know, but I know what I want us to be. She set down the wine glass. And I think you know too. The rain picked up, drumming harder against the roof. Caleb's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. He was my brother, he said finally. I know. He trusted me. With everything. With you. And when he died, he didn't ask you to take a vow of loneliness. Lena stood, closing the distance between them. David loved you. He would want you happy. You don't know that. I do. Because I loved him too, and I know exactly what kind of man he was. He wouldn't want either of us frozen in grief for the rest of our lives. Caleb shook his head. It's not that simple. Why not? Because he struggled for words, for the logic that had kept him in line for 3 years. Because Sophie needs stability. She needs family she can count on. If this goes wrong, and if it goes right? He had no answer for that. He'd spent so long preparing for disaster, for loss, for pain, that he'd forgotten how to imagine joy. Lena reached out, her fingers brushing his. The touch was electric, simple, and devastating all at once. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight, she said. I'm just asking you to stop pretending you don't feel it too. Lena, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't think about me when you're alone. Tell me you don't catch yourself wondering what if, the same way I do. Her voice cracked. Tell me I'm imagining this and I'll drop it. I'll go back to being just Aunt Lena, just the helpful widow, just the woman who makes pot roast on birthdays. Caleb wanted to lie. He tried to lie. But looking at her face, seeing 3 years of carefully hidden hope finally exposed, he couldn't do it. You're not imagining it, he whispered. The relief that flooded her expression was almost painful to witness. Okay, she breathed. Okay, that's all I needed to hear. But it wasn't all. They both knew it wasn't all. Admission was just the first crack in a dam that had been holding back a flood for years. The rain continued its steady rhythm. Somewhere in the guest room, Sophie slept, oblivious to the seismic shift happening in the living room. The candles flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls like ghosts of the past and specters of possible futures. Caleb should leave, should walk out that door, drive home, rebuild the walls that were crumbling with every passing second. But his feet wouldn't move. His hand wouldn't let go of hers. "What happens now?" he asked. Lena's thumb traced small circles on his palm. "I don't know, but I'm tired of being afraid to find out." Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the room for a split second. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was getting closer. And Caleb realized, standing there with Lena's hand in his and his daughter sleeping safely down the hall, that maybe he was tired too. Tired of being careful. Tired of saying no. Tired of living half a life because he was terrified of losing what little he had left. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Neither do I." Lena smiled, sad and hopeful all at once. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out together." The words settled between them like a promise, fragile and fierce. Caleb didn't pull away, didn't retreat. For the first time in 3 years, he stood still and let himself feel everything he'd been running from. The want, the fear, the possibility that happiness might not be a betrayal after all. The candles burned lower, the rain fell harder, and in the warm safety of Lena's living room, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the uncertain promise of the future, Caleb took the first terrifying step towards something he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve. Tomorrow, he'd panic. Tomorrow, he'd second guess. Tomorrow, he'd build new walls and find new reasons why this was impossible. But tonight, with thunder rolling overhead and Lena's hand in his, Caleb Moore allowed himself to hope. Caleb didn't sleep that night. He drove home through the rain-slicked streets at 10:30, his hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly gone liquid and uncertain. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm, back and forth, but they couldn't clear the fog in his head. "I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I'm just asking you to stop pretending you don't feel it too." Lena's words played on repeat, a loop he couldn't shut off. He'd left her house with nothing resolved, everything exposed. They'd stood in that living room for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, hands clasped, not speaking, just existing in the terrifying honesty of what they'd finally admitted. Then Sophie had called out in her sleep, a small sound that broke the spell, and Caleb had seized the interruption like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. He'd kissed Lena on the cheek, safe, brotherly, the kind of goodbye they'd exchanged 100 times before, and walked out into the storm before she could say anything else that might shatter him completely. Now, alone in his too-quiet house, he paced the living room floor, still wearing his damp clothes, his mind racing through every possible consequence of what had just happened. This was Lena, David's Lena, his brother's widow. Except she wasn't David's anymore, was she? David had been gone for 3 years. 3 years of Lena rebuilding her life, learning to exist without the man she'd married at 22. 3 years of her showing up for Sophie, for Caleb, for a family that grief had shattered and then awkwardly reassembled. 3 years of Caleb telling himself that the way his heart jumped when she laughed was just affection, that the way he looked forward to their Sunday dinners was just routine, that the way he noticed everything about her, the new way she wore her hair, the reading glasses she'd started using, the garden she'd planted in defiance of Wyoming's harsh climate, was just attentiveness. He'd been lying to himself, and tonight the lie had finally collapsed. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Lena. "Thank you for coming tonight, for staying, for being honest. Sleep well." He stared at the message for a full minute before typing back, "You too." Inadequate. Everything he wanted to say felt either too much or not enough, so he settled for safe and hated himself for it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "We don't have to figure it all out at once, one day at a time." "One day at a time," he typed back, and tried to believe it was possible. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, the storm having passed but leaving the world looking washed out and weary. Caleb made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, until his phone rang at 7:15. Lena's name on the screen. His stomach lurched. "Hey," he answered. "Hey, did I wake you?" "Been up since 5. A pause. Me too. They breathed in sync across the phone line, neither knowing what to say, both afraid to say the wrong thing. Sophie's still asleep, Lena said finally. I was going to make pancakes, her favorite. You could, you could come over if you want. We could talk, or not talk, just, I'll be there in 20 minutes. He showered in record time, threw on clean clothes, and was backing out of the driveway when his phone rang again. Different name this time. His mother. Caleb's hand hovered over the decline button before guilt won out. Morning, Mom. Caleb, honey, I was hoping to catch you before church. Your father and I wanted to know if you and Sophie would join us for lunch afterward. We haven't seen our granddaughter in 2 weeks. Sophie wasn't technically their granddaughter. She was their nephew's daughter, a distinction his mother pretended didn't exist while simultaneously using it as ammunition whenever she felt Caleb wasn't raising Sophie correctly. But he'd learned to navigate his mother's contradictions the same way he navigated everything else, with patience and careful distance. Can I let you know later? I'm actually heading out right now. Where to this early on a Sunday? Just running an errand. What kind of errand requires... Caleb Moore, are you going to see that woman? His grip tightened on the wheel. If you mean Lena, yes. I'm picking up Sophie. She slept over last night. The disapproval radiated through the phone. I don't understand why you continue this arrangement. It's not healthy, Caleb, for you or for Sophie. That woman should have moved on by now, found a new life. Instead, she's clinging to you and... Don't! His voice came out harder than intended. Don't talk about Lena like that. I'm your mother. I'm allowed to be concerned about who you're spending time with, especially when my granddaughter is involved. Sophie loves Lena. Lena's been good to us. Good for us. Has she? His mother's tone shifted, became sharper. Or has she just been convenient? A ready-made family for a lonely widow, without any of the real responsibility. Caleb pulled over to the side of the road, unable to drive and have this conversation simultaneously. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm saying what everyone in town has been too polite to mention. That woman has had her hooks in you since the funeral, playing the grieving widow while making sure you never have a chance to move on with your own life. That's not... She's never... He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't find words through the anger building in his chest. You were supposed to help her get back on her feet, Caleb, not become her permanent crutch. And now you're over there every Sunday, fixing her house, taking Sophie to play with her, acting like some kind of substitute husband. I have to go. Caleb, I'm just trying to... He hung up. His hands were shaking. The worst part was that his mother's words echoed thoughts he'd had himself late at night, when the guilt got too heavy. Was he being used? Had he let Lena become dependent on him in unhealthy ways? Was he substituting his brother's life for his own? No, that wasn't fair. Lena had never asked him for anything he hadn't freely offered. She'd rebuilt her life with remarkable strength, kept her job as a teacher, maintained her house, created a new routine that didn't include David. She didn't need Caleb. She chose him. And that choice, he was starting to realize, was what terrified him most. At Lena's house, Sophie answered the door in her pajamas, syrup already on her chin. Dad! Aunt Lena made chocolate chip pancakes and I helped flip them, and we only burned 2. Caleb stepped inside, and the smell of vanilla and butter wrapped around him like a hug. Lena stood in the kitchen doorway, wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun, no makeup, looking more beautiful than anyone had a right to look on a Sunday morning. Hey, she said softly. Hey. Sophie grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the kitchen. Come eat. There's tons left, and Aunt Lena made the good kind of bacon, the really crispy kind you like. They ate at the kitchen table, Sophie maintaining a steady stream of conversation about everything and nothing. Caleb caught Lena's eye several times across the table, saw his own uncertainty reflected there, mixed with something that looked like hope. After breakfast, Sophie went to watch cartoons, and Caleb helped Lena clean up. They moved around each other carefully, hyper-aware of every accidental brush of hands, every moment of closeness. Your mom called, didn't she? Lena asked, scrubbing a pan. How did you... You have a specific look when you talk to her. Tense. Like you're bracing for impact. He dried a plate, set it in the cabinet. She had opinions about last night. About us. About... Everything. Let me guess. I'm a lonely widow with inappropriate attachment to her dead husband's brother. The accuracy of it made him wince. Something like that. Lena's hands stilled in the soapy water. Is that what you think? No. Maybe. I don't know what I think anymore. She turned to face him, suds dripping on the floor between them. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. Can you do that? He nodded. I love David. I will always love David. He was my first love, my husband, the man I thought I'd grow old with. Her voice was steady, clear. But he's gone. And I spent 2 years thinking that meant my life was over too, that loving anyone else would be a betrayal, that I was supposed to just exist, go through the motions, be the tragic widow until I died. Lena, let me finish. She took a breath. You changed that. Not because you were trying to replace David or because I was looking for a substitute. You changed it because you showed up. Every Sunday, every emergency, every small moment when I needed someone and you were just there. You became my friend, my partner in keeping Sophie's world stable. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was falling in love with you. The words hit him like a physical blow. Love. She'd said love. I know it's complicated, she continued. I know people will talk. I know your mother already thinks I'm manipulating you. I know every single reason why this is a terrible idea. Her eyes met his, unwavering. But I also know that I haven't felt this alive, this hopeful, this happy in 3 years. And it's because of you. Caleb's throat was too tight to speak. He set down the dish towel with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. You don't have to say anything, Lena said quickly. I just needed you to know. No more dancing around it, no more pretending. I can't, his voice cracked. I can't give you what you want. What do you think I want? A future. A relationship. Something I'm not capable of. Why aren't you capable of it? Because I have Sophie. Because my entire life is about making sure she's okay, that she has stability, that she doesn't lose anyone else. I can't be distracted by what? By being happy? Lena stepped closer. How is you being miserable better for Sophie? How is you shutting yourself off from any chance at love, teaching her how to live a full life? She needs me focused. She needs you whole. There's a difference. From the living room, Sophie called out, Dad, can we go to the park? Please? Caleb seized the interruption. Yeah, honey, we'll go. Lena's expression shuddered, the vulnerability replaced by something more guarded. Of course, you should spend time together. Lena, it's fine. Really. She turned back to the sink. I'll see you next Sunday, or whenever. The dismissal stung more than it should have. Caleb wanted to say something, to fix this, but Sophie was already bringing him her shoes, chattering about the swings and the slide, and could they please get ice cream after? He gathered their things, helped Sophie into her jacket, avoided looking at Lena's face. At the door, he paused. Thank you for breakfast, he said. Anytime. The word hung heavy with everything they weren't saying. The park was nearly empty, the cold morning keeping most families indoors. Sophie ran straight for the swings, and Caleb pushed her higher and higher, watching her laugh against the gray sky. Higher, Dad, higher! He pushed, and she soared, fearless and free. Are you sad? Sophie asked after a while, dragging her feet to slow down. No, honey. Why? You have your sad face. The one you get when you're thinking too hard about grown-up stuff. Caleb caught the swing, stopping it. I'm fine. Just tired. Sophie turned to look at him, her expression far too wise for 7 years old. Is it about Aunt Lena? His heart stuttered. What makes you say that? You were both being weird at breakfast, like when my friends at school have a fight, but pretend they don't. We didn't fight. Then why did you leave so fast? Caleb sat on the swing next to hers, the cold chain biting through his jacket. How did you explain adult complications to a child? How did you make her understand things you didn't understand yourself? Sometimes grown-ups have to figure out complicated things, he said carefully, and figuring them out can be hard. What kind of complicated things? Just Feelings, relationships, how people fit together. Sophie kicked at the dirt beneath her feet. I think you and Aunt Lena fit together good. Yeah? Yeah, she makes you smile, and you make her happy. I can tell. She looked up at him with David's eyes, that same dark brown, that same intensity. Don't you want to be happy, Dad? I am happy. I have you. That's not the same thing. You can have me and still want other stuff too. When had his daughter become so perceptive? When had she stopped being the little girl who needed him to explain everything and started being the one offering wisdom? It's more complicated than that, Soph. Grown-ups always say that, but sometimes I think you just make it complicated so you don't have to be brave. The words landed like stones, out of the mouths of babes. They stayed at the park for another hour, but Caleb's mind was elsewhere. He pushed Sophie on the swings, helped her across the monkey bars, sat on a bench while she played with a group of kids who'd arrived later. And the whole time his daughter's question echoed, "Don't you want to be happy?" Of course he wanted to be happy, but happiness felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Happiness meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant risk, and risk meant potential loss. He'd already lost his brother, already watched Sophie lose her father. How could he take a chance on something that might end badly? How could he introduce instability into the fragile peace they'd built? But wasn't that what he was already doing by holding Lena at arm's length? Wasn't the tension, the unspoken feelings, the careful distance, wasn't that its own kind of instability? His phone buzzed. Another text from his mother. "We need to talk about your priorities. Call me." He deleted it without responding. They skipped the ice cream. Caleb took Sophie home, made her lunch, watched her do homework at the kitchen table. Normal Sunday things. Safe, predictable, controllable things. At 4 o'clock, his phone rang. Not his mother this time. Lena. He almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But Sophie was watching him with those knowing eyes, and he could hear her voice in his head. Sometimes you just make it complicated so you don't have to be brave. Hello? Hi. Lena's voice was quiet. I'm sorry about earlier. I shouldn't have pushed. I said I wouldn't, and then I did exactly that. You don't have to apologize. Yes, I do. This is scary for you. I get that. I got caught up in my own feelings and forgot that you need time to process. Caleb looked at Sophie, who was pretending to focus on her math worksheet while clearly listening to every word. He stood, walked to his bedroom, closed the door. I'm scared, he admitted, the words coming out before he could stop them. I'm terrified, Lena, of what this means, of what could happen, of screwing it all up. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you seem pretty sure about everything. Meanwhile, I'm over here feeling like I'm about to drive off a cliff. I'm not sure about everything. I'm just sure about you. Her voice wavered slightly. And I'm scared too. Scared you'll decide I'm not worth the risk. Scared I'll lose you completely by wanting more. Scared I'm reading this whole thing wrong and making a fool of myself. You're not making a fool of yourself. Then what am I doing? Being braver than me. A soft laugh, almost sad. Bravery's easier when you've already lost everything that mattered. I've already survived the worst. What's left to be afraid of? Caleb sat on the edge of his bed, the weight of 3 years pressing down on his shoulders. Sophie, he said quietly. Sophie's what I'm afraid of. If we do this, if we try and it doesn't work, she loses another person she loves. I can't put her through that. And if we don't try, if we just keep pretending, what does she lose then? He didn't have an answer. Can I ask you something? Lena said after a long silence. Yeah. Do you think David would want this for you? This half-life you're living? Working yourself to death? Saying no to everything? Shutting yourself off from any chance at happiness? That's not fair. Why not? He's the ghost in the room, Caleb. We both know it. So I'm asking, honestly, do you think your brother would want you to spend the rest of your life alone because you're too afraid to dishonor his memory? Caleb's eyes burned. He pressed the heel of his hand against them, fighting back tears he hadn't let himself cry in years. David, his older brother, his hero, the man who'd taught him how to throw a football and drive a truck and ask a girl to dance. David, who'd called him 2 days before the accident, excited about Sophie's upcoming birthday, making plans Caleb had promised to help with. Take care of them, David had said once, months before the crash, during a conversation about wills and life insurance that had felt morbid at the time. If anything ever happens to me, make sure Lena and Sophie are okay. Caleb had promised. And he'd kept that promise, hadn't he? He'd been there for every crisis, every milestone, every moment they needed him. He'd honored his brother's trust. But had David meant this? Had he meant for Caleb to sacrifice his own future on the altar of responsibility? Or had he just meant, be there for them, love them, keep them safe? And if Caleb loved Lena, really loved her the way his pounding heart and sleepless nights suggested he did, wasn't that another form of keeping them safe? Wasn't giving Sophie a stable, happy home better than this careful distance, this performative grief? I don't know what he'd want, Caleb said finally. I wish I did. I wish he was here to ask, but he's not, and I'm doing the best I can with an impossible situation. I know you are, and I'm not trying to make it harder. Then what are you trying to do? I'm trying to give you permission to be happy, to want something for yourself, to believe that you deserve more than this martyrdom you've wrapped yourself in. Through the bedroom door, Caleb could hear Sophie singing to herself in the kitchen, some song from school, off-key and cheerful. His daughter. The little girl who looked at him like he hung the moon, who trusted him to make the right decisions, who wanted nothing more than for him to smile more often. What kind of example was he setting? What was he teaching her about love, about risk, about living fully instead of just surviving? I need time, he said. How much time? I don't know, but I can't. We can't just jump into this. It's too big, too complicated. Okay, Lena's voice was gentle. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. What if I take too long? What if you meet someone else, someone without all this baggage, someone who can give you what you deserve without all these complications? Caleb. She said his name like a prayer. There is no someone else. There's just you. However long it takes, whatever you decide, there's just you. The words broke something open in his chest. He wanted to tell her he loved her. The words sat on his tongue, ready, true, terrifying. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not when everything felt so fragile, so uncertain. I should go, he said instead. Sophie's probably destroying the kitchen trying to make herself a snack. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for being honest, for not running away completely. I'm trying. I know, that's all I'm asking. They said goodbye and Caleb sat in the silence of his bedroom, phone in hand, heart in pieces. Through the door, Sophie was still singing. The sun was setting, painting the room in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would come with all its demands and routines, work, school pickup, homework, dinner. The same cycle that had sustained him for 3 years. But something had shifted. The ground beneath his carefully constructed life had cracked, and Caleb could feel himself falling towards something he couldn't name, something that felt like hope and terror in equal measure. He stood, opened the door, found Sophie in the kitchen surrounded by ingredients for what looked like an attempted sandwich. Peanut butter on the counter, jelly on the floor, bread scattered across 3 different surfaces. I'm making dinner, she announced proudly. I can see that. It's going to be really good, probably. Caleb laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he'd laughed without it feeling forced? Need some help? Nope, I got it. You just sit down and relax. You look tired. He sat, watched his daughter create chaos in the name of self-sufficiency. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb let himself imagine a different kind of future. One where Sunday dinners at Lena's weren't fraught with tension, where his daughter had 2 people showing up for her instead of one worn-out man doing his best, where happiness wasn't a betrayal but a gift, one where Caleb Moore stopped running from the one thing that might actually save him. Sophie presented him with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that was more jelly than sandwich, the bread squished from her enthusiastic assembly. Ta-da! It's perfect, he said, and meant it. She beamed at him, then climbed into his lap even though she was getting too big for it, wrapping her arms around his neck. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Sophie girl. Are you going to be okay? The question, coming from her instead of him, nearly undid him completely. His 7-year-old daughter worried about him, trying to take care of him the way he'd always taken care of her. Yeah, honey, I'm going to be okay. Promise? He thought about Lena, about his mother's judgment, about the town gossip that would inevitably follow if he made the choice his heart was begging him to make, about David's memory and Sophie's needs and his own deep-seated terror of loss. Then he thought about Sophie's earlier words. Sometimes you just make it complicated so you don't have to be brave. Promise, he said, and hoped he wasn't lying. The week that followed felt like walking through fog. Caleb went through the motions: work, pickup, dinner, bedtime. But his mind was elsewhere, caught in the space between what he wanted and what he thought he should want. Every night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, having conversations with ghosts and hypothetical futures, never reaching any conclusion that felt right. Lena gave him space. No calls, no unexpected visits, just a simple text each morning. Hope you have a good day. Nothing demanding, nothing heavy. Just enough to remind him she was still there, still waiting, still choosing him despite his cowardice. On Wednesday, Martin pulled him aside during his lunch break. You've been distracted all week. Everything okay at home? Caleb closed his toolbox, avoiding eye contact. Everything's fine. Sophie doing all right? She's great. Good grades, good friends, no complaints. Martin leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Then what's eating you? And don't say nothing. I've known you too long. The temptation to confide in someone, anyone, was overwhelming. But Martin went to the same church as Caleb's mother, lived in the same small-town ecosystem where gossip traveled faster than truth. Whatever Caleb said would be all over town by Sunday. Just tired, he said. Been picking up extra shifts, trying to save up for Sophie's birthday next month. It was a believable lie. Martin nodded, clapped him on the shoulder. Well, don't burn yourself out. Kid needs a healthy dad more than she needs expensive presents. The words followed Caleb home that evening, mixing with everything else rattling around in his head. What did Sophie need, really need, beneath the surface level of food and shelter and homework help? He found out on Thursday. Sophie's school called at 2:15, right in the middle of inventory. The principal, Mrs. Walsh, had a voice like warm honey over steel. Mr. Moore, I need you to come pick up Sophie. There's been an incident. Caleb's heart dropped. Is she hurt? What happened? She's physically fine, but there was a situation on the playground, and I think it's best we discuss it in person. He left work immediately, Martin waving him off with a concerned frown. The drive to Riverside Elementary took 9 minutes that felt like 90. His mind conjured worst-case scenarios. Sophie hurt, Sophie in trouble, Sophie finally cracking under the weight of a life that had asked too much of her too soon. Mrs. Walsh met him in the office, her expression carefully neutral. Sophie's in the nurse's room. She's upset but unharmed. What happened? She got into a confrontation with another student. According to witnesses, the other child made some comments about Sophie's family situation, and Sophie responded physically. Caleb's stomach turned. She hit someone? She pushed another girl during recess. The girl fell and scraped her knee. It's not serious, but it's completely out of character for Sophie. She's never been aggressive before. They found Sophie sitting on the nurse's cot, her face blotchy from crying, her arms wrapped around herself. When she saw Caleb, fresh tears spilled over. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. She was saying mean things and I'm sorry. He sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. She buried her face in his shirt, her small body shaking. It's okay, honey. Just tell me what happened. Through hiccuping sobs, the story emerged. Madison Clark, a girl in Sophie's class, had cornered her during recess, had said things about how Sophie didn't have a real family, how her dad was just her uncle pretending, how her mom was dead and her real dad was dead. And that made her an orphan, a charity case, someone to pity. And then she said, Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. She said Aunt Lena was trying to trap you, that her mom heard it at Bible study, that Aunt Lena wants to marry you for your money even though we don't have any money, and that you're too stupid to see it. Red-hot anger flooded Caleb's veins. Who told Madison that? Mrs. Walsh cleared her throat from the doorway. Mr. Moore, I don't think it's productive to it. Who? Told her, the principal sighed. Madison's mother is Jennifer Clark. I believe you know her? Emma's mother. The woman who'd smiled at him at the birthday party, who'd called Sophie lucky, who'd probably gone straight from that conversation to her church group to spread speculation dressed up as concern. I need to talk to her, Caleb said tightly. That's not necessary. I've already spoken to both families. Madison will be serving detention, and we've had a serious discussion about bullying and appropriate behavior. That's not enough. Mr. Moore, I understand you're upset, but do you? He stood, still holding Sophie. Do you understand what it's like to have people you thought were neighbors, friends, talking about your family, like it's entertainment? Saying things that hurt a 7-year-old child? Mrs. Walsh's expression softened. I do understand, and I'm sorry this happened, but confronting Madison's mother will only escalate the situation. The best thing you can do is take Sophie home, let her rest, and we'll handle the disciplinary measures here. She was right. Caleb knew she was right, but the protective rage burning in his chest didn't care about what was right. It cared about his daughter crying in his arms because small-minded people couldn't keep their judgments to themselves. He took Sophie home, let her skip homework, made her favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese from the box, with hot dogs cut into it. They ate in silence, Sophie pushing food around her plate without much appetite. Am I in big trouble? She asked finally. You shouldn't have pushed Madison. That wasn't okay. I know. But I understand why you did it. Sometimes when people say hurtful things, our feelings get too big, and we react before we think. Sophie looked up at him with watery eyes. Is it true? What she said about Aunt Lena? Which part? That she wants to marry you, that people think it's wrong. Caleb set down his fork, his appetite gone. How did he answer this? How did he explain adult complications and small-town prejudices to a child who just wanted the people she loved to be happy? Some people have opinions about how other people should live their lives, he said carefully. They don't understand that families can look different and still be real, still be full of love. But do you want to marry Aunt Lena? Sophie? Because I wouldn't mind if you did. I think it would be nice. Then she could live with us and make pancakes all the time, and we could be a real family. We are a real family, right now, you and me. I know, but... She twisted her napkin. Don't you get lonely? I have friends at school and stuff to do, but you just work and take care of me. That doesn't seem fair. Out of the mouths of babes. Again. My job is to take care of you, Caleb said. That's what parents do. But who takes care of you? The question hit him like a punch. Who did take care of him? Who checked in, asked how he was really doing, noticed when he was running on empty? Lena. The answer was Lena, and it had been for years, and he'd been too wrapped up in fear and guilt to acknowledge it. I take care of myself, he said, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. Sophie pushed her plate away. Can I call Aunt Lena? I want to tell her what happened. She always knows what to say when I'm sad. Not tonight, honey. It's late. It's only 7:30. Still too late. You need to get ready for bed. I'm not tired. Sophia, please, Dad, please. I just want to hear her voice, just for 5 minutes. The desperation in her tone broke him. He handed over his phone, watched his daughter dial from memory, saw her face light up when Lena answered. Aunt Lena? It's me. Yeah, I know it's Dad's phone. No, he's right here. I just wanted to talk to you. I had a bad day at school. Sophie walked to her bedroom, voice fading, leaving Caleb alone in the kitchen with cold macaroni and the crushing weight of realization. His daughter needed Lena, not as an occasional visitor, not as the nice lady who made Sunday dinners. She needed her the way children need stability, consistency, love that doesn't waver. And if he was being honest, really, brutally honest, he needed her too. 20 minutes later, Sophie emerged, eyes red but calmer. She handed back the phone. Aunt Lena wants to talk to you. Soph, it's late. I'll call her tomorrow. She said it's important. Please? He took the phone, waited until Sophie was back in her room before speaking. Hey. Hey. Lena's voice was tight with controlled emotion. She told me what happened, what that woman said. Kids say cruel things. She's 7. She didn't understand, but her mother did. Jennifer Clark understood exactly what she was saying at Bible study, and she knew exactly what would happen when she said it. Lena, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. It matters because this is my fault. I've been selfish, pushing you, making my feelings your problem, and now Sophie's paying the price. That's not... You didn't do anything wrong. Didn't I? Her voice cracked. I put you in an impossible position. I forced you to acknowledge something you weren't ready for, and now people are talking, judging, saying things that hurt Sophie, that hurts you. Caleb gripped the phone tighter. You didn't force anything. I'm a grown man. I make my own choices. Then choose, Caleb. The words came out fierce, desperate. Choose what you want, not what's safe, not what other people think is appropriate, what you actually want. I want... He stopped, started again. I want Sophie to be happy. I want her to grow up feeling loved and secure. I want to be the father she deserves. And what about what Caleb Moore deserves? What about your happiness? My happiness doesn't matter as much as stop, just stop. Lena's breathing was ragged. You've been saying that for 3 years, that you don't matter, that your needs come last, that being a good father means erasing yourself. But you're teaching Sophie a terrible lesson, Caleb. You're teaching her that love means sacrifice and suffering, that wanting things for yourself is selfish. Is that really what you want her to learn? He had no answer. The silence stretched between them until Lena spoke again, softer this time. I'm going to make this easier for you. I'm going to step back. No more Sunday dinners, no more texts, no more pressure. You need space to figure out what you want without me complicating things. Lena, no. It's for the best. Tell Sophie I love her. Tell her I'm always here if she needs me. But you and I need distance, for everyone's sake. Please don't do this. I have to, because if I don't, you never will, and we'll spend the next 3 years in this limbo. And I can't keep hoping, Caleb. I can't keep waiting for you to be brave enough to want me. I do want you. The words burst out before he could stop them. I want you so much, it terrifies me. Silence. Then, so quiet he almost missed it. Then why does it feel like you're running away? Because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a good father and a good partner. I don't know how to let you in without risking everything I've built for Sophie. I don't know how to choose myself without feeling like I'm betraying everyone who's counting on me. Maybe you're not supposed to know. Maybe you just have to trust that we'll figure it out together. And if we don't? If we try and it falls apart and Sophie loses another person she loves? What if we try and it works? What if Sophie gains a family that's whole and happy? What if you stop carrying everything alone? Lena's voice broke. What if we get to be happy, Caleb? Is that really so impossible to imagine? It should be impossible. Logic said it was impossible. But standing in his kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, Caleb could see it clearly. Sunday mornings at Lena's table, Sophie laughing between them. Movie nights on the couch, all 3 of them crowded together. Holiday dinners where he wasn't alone in the kitchen, wasn't handling everything by himself. A life that looked like partnership instead of survival. A life that looked like love. I need to see you, he said. Not on the phone, in person. When? Tomorrow, after I drop Sophie at school. Can you meet me somewhere? Where? He thought fast. Somewhere private, away from town gossips and prying eyes. The old barn, Miller's property. You know the one? I know it. What time? 8:30. Okay. A pause. Caleb? Yeah? Whatever you need to say tomorrow, just say it. No more dancing around, no more protecting my feelings, just the truth. The truth, he repeated. I can do that. They said goodbye, and Caleb stood in the quiet kitchen, his heart pounding against his ribs. The truth. What was the truth? That he was terrified? That he was falling apart? That every carefully constructed wall he'd built was crumbling and he didn't know how to stop it? Or that he was tired of being afraid? Tired of choosing safety over happiness? Tired of watching life pass him by while he clung to the wreckage of the past? Sophie appeared in the doorway wearing her pajamas. Is Aunt Lena mad at me? No, baby. She's not mad at you. She's never mad at you. Then why does she sound so sad? Because grown-ups are complicated. That's what you always say. Because it's always true. Sophie crossed to him, wrapped her arms around his waist. I don't want her to go away. I don't want things to change. Caleb pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Sometimes things have to change, Sophie, even when it's scary. Are you going to marry her? I don't know. But you love her. I can tell. How can you tell? Sophie looked up at him with those two wise eyes. Because you get the same look Mommy Lena gets when she talks about Uncle David, like you're happy and sad at the same time. Uncle David. Sophie had started calling him that about a year after the accident, when she was old enough to understand that David was her real father, but Caleb was her dad. It was her way of honoring both, of holding space for complicated truth. I do love her, Caleb admitted. But love doesn't always mean things work out the way we want. Why not? Because life is complicated. You keep saying that because you keep asking impossible questions. Sophie giggled despite herself, then grew serious again. Madison said Aunt Lena is trying to trap you. What does that mean? It means Madison's mother doesn't understand our family, and that's okay. Not everyone has to understand. But it hurt my feelings. I know, honey. I know it did. Are you going to fix it? The simple faith in her voice, the absolute certainty that her father could fix anything, was almost too much to bear. What if he couldn't fix this? What if there was no solution that didn't hurt someone? I'm going to try, he said. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Caleb did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He pulled out the box from the back of his closet, the one marked David in his own handwriting. Inside were photos, letters, random mementos of a life cut short. He sifted through them until he found what he was looking for. A letter David had written him 10 years ago, when Caleb was 18 and leaving for college. Little brother, it read in David's messy scrawl, by the time you read this, you'll be in some dorm room wondering what the hell you're doing with your life. So let me tell you, you're going to screw up. A lot. You're going to make choices that seem right at the time and turn out wrong. You're going to hurt people you love. You're going to be scared and uncertain and absolutely convinced you're failing. That's called being human. The only real failure is playing it so safe that you never actually live. Take risks, fall in love, do stupid things for the right reasons. And when life kicks you in the teeth, because it will, get back up and try again. I'm proud of you. Not for being perfect, for being brave enough to be imperfect. Love, your pain-in-the-ass older brother. Caleb read it 3 times, tears blurring the words. David wouldn't want this. David, who'd proposed to Lena after 6 months of dating despite everyone saying it was too fast. David, who'd quit a stable job to start his own business despite the risk. David, who'd lived every day like it mattered because he understood somehow that none of it was guaranteed. David would want Caleb to be happy, to take the risk, to choose love over fear. The certainty settled over him like a blanket. He knew what he had to do. Morning came cold and clear. Caleb dropped Sophie at school, watching her run inside with the resilience that 7-year-olds somehow possessed. She'd be okay. Whatever he decided, whatever happened next, Sophie would be okay. The Miller property sat on the outskirts of town, 20 acres of grass and sky, and an old barn that hadn't been used for anything but storage in a decade. Caleb pulled up at 8:25, his hands sweating despite the cold. Lena's truck was already there. He found her inside the barn, sitting on an old hay bale, wrapped in a coat too big for her frame. She looked up when he entered, and the vulnerability in her expression made his chest ache. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He sat beside her, close enough to touch, but not touching. For a long moment, they just existed in the dusty silence, breathing the same air, occupying the same space. "I've been thinking," Caleb started. "Dangerous activity." Despite everything, he smiled. "About what you said. About teaching Sophie the wrong lessons. About sacrifice and suffering. Caleb, I shouldn't have—" "You were right." He turned to face her. "You were right about all of it. I've been so focused on being the perfect father, the responsible uncle, the guy who never makes mistakes, that I forgot how to just be. Be happy, be myself, be someone who wants things. Lena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. What do you want? I want Sunday mornings without the weight of everything unsaid. I want to stop lying to myself about how I feel. I want Sophie to see what real partnership looks like, not just one person carrying everything alone. And I want you. The words came easier this time. I want you in my life, in Sophie's life, in a real way. Not as the nice widow we visit, not as David's ghost, as Lena, as the woman I'm falling in love with. She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Falling? Okay, fine. The woman I've already fallen for, the woman who makes me laugh and calls me out when I'm being stupid and shows up even when I push her away. He took her hand, felt her fingers tremble in his. I'm terrified, Lena. I'm terrified of screwing this up, of what people will say, of whether I even know how to be in a relationship after all this time. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what if. What about Sophie? Sophie wants me happy. She told me so. Multiple times, actually. Apparently, I'm not as subtle as I thought. Lena laughed through tears. She's a smart kid. She is. And she loves you. Really loves you. Not just as Aunt Lena, as someone she wants in her life permanently. And your mother? The town? Everyone with opinions about what we should or shouldn't do? Let them talk. The words felt like freedom. Let them think whatever they want. I'm done living my life according to other people's rules. Lena studied his face, searching for doubt, for hesitation. You're sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back. Once we're together, really together, it changes everything. I know. People will judge us. Say we're dishonoring David's memory. Say I seduced you. Say you're taking advantage of a vulnerable widow. I know. Your mother will probably disown you. Probably. And it might not work. We might try this and discover we're terrible together. We might fight and disagree and make each other miserable. Or we might not. Caleb moved closer until their foreheads touched. We might be great together. We might build something beautiful. We might give Sophie the stable, loving home she deserves. We might actually be happy. Happy, Lena whispered. Imagine that. I am imagining it. Have been for months. And I'm done pretending I'm not. She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. So what happens now? Now we try. We take it slow. We're honest with Sophie about what's happening. We deal with whatever comes. Together. Together, she repeated, like she was testing the word. Together. Lena kissed him. It was soft and tentative and tasted like tears and hope and 3 years of waiting. Caleb pulled her closer, let himself fall into the moment, into the terrifying joy of choosing something for himself. When they finally broke apart, Lena was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile he hadn't seen since before David died. We're really doing this, she said. We're really doing this. Your mother's going to kill you. Probably. The whole town is going to talk. Definitely. Sophie's going to be insufferable about being right. Absolutely, Lena laughed, and the sound filled the barn, chasing out shadows and ghosts and all the heavy weight of the past. When do we tell her? Today, after school. No more secrets, no more dancing around it. We sit her down and we're honest. What if she changes her mind? What if the reality is different from what she imagined? Then we deal with that too. Caleb stood, pulling Lena to her feet. No more what ifs, no more worst case scenarios. We just live and handle whatever comes. They walked out of the barn hand in hand into the bright Wyoming morning. Caleb felt lighter than he had in years, like he'd set down a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. There would be hard conversations ahead, judgment from his mother, gossip at church, questions from Sophie. 1,000 complications he couldn't predict. But for the first time since David's funeral, Caleb Moore wasn't afraid of the future. He was ready to meet it head on, with Lena beside him and his daughter's happiness as his compass. He was ready to be brave. They told Sophie that afternoon, sitting together on the living room couch, like they were about to deliver news of a terminal diagnosis rather than the beginning of something hopeful. Caleb had rehearsed a dozen versions of the conversation on the drive from the barn to the school, each one feeling simultaneously too blunt and too vague. Sophie burst through the classroom door at 3:46, saw both of them waiting in the parking lot, and stopped mid-stride. Her backpack slid off one shoulder as her eyes darted between Caleb and Lena, confusion mixing with something that looked like cautious hope. "Why are you both here?" she asked, walking slowly toward them. "We need to talk to you about something," Caleb said, hearing the weight in his own voice and hating it. "Important grown-up stuff." Sophie's face fell. "Am I in more trouble?" Because Madison already apologized, and Mrs. Walsh said, "You're not in trouble, sweetheart," Lena said quickly. "This is about us, about our family." The word family made Sophie's expression shift again. She climbed into the truck without another word, sandwiched between the two adults, her small hands gripping the edge of the seat. At home, Caleb made hot chocolate, the kind with real cocoa and way too many marshmallows, while Lena sat with Sophie at the kitchen table. The domestic normalcy of it struck him hard. This could be their life. This scene, repeated hundreds of times in hundreds of variations. The three of them together, navigating the ordinary and extraordinary moments that made up a family. He set the mugs down and took a breath. "Sophie, you know how you said you wanted me to be happy, and how you said you wouldn't mind if Aunt Lena and I got married?" Sophie's eyes went wide. "Are you getting married right now?" "No, not right now, but—" He looked at Lena, found strength in her steady gaze. "Lena and I care about each other, more than just friends. We want to spend more time together. See if we can build something real." "Like boyfriend and girlfriend?" Sophie asked, the words sounding strange in her 7-year-old voice. "Kind of like that, yeah." Sophie was quiet for a long moment, her fingers wrapped around her mug. "Is Uncle David okay with this?" The question hit Caleb like a physical blow. Out of all the complications he'd anticipated, his daughter asking for permission from a ghost hadn't been one of them. Lena reached across the table, covering Sophie's small hand with her own. "Your Uncle David loved your dad very much, and he loved me. And more than anything, he wanted the people he loved to be happy. I know, he'd want this for us." "How do you know?" "Because when you really love someone, you want them to live a full life, even after you're gone." Lena's voice caught. "Your Uncle David wouldn't want me sad forever, and he definitely wouldn't want your dad carrying everything alone." Sophie considered this, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Madison's mom says it's wrong, that you're supposed to stay sad when someone dies." "Madison's mom," Caleb said carefully, "has opinions about things that aren't her business. What matters is what we think, what we feel, what makes our family work." "And this makes our family work? You and Aunt Lena being boyfriend and girlfriend? We think it might, but we need you to be okay with it too, because you're the most important person in both our lives." Sophie took a sip of hot chocolate, leaving a marshmallow mustache on her upper lip. "What changes? Like, does Aunt Lena move in here? Do we move to her house? Do I get to call her mom?" The questions came rapid fire, practical in the way only children could be. Caleb and Lena exchanged a glance. "Nothing changes right away," Lena said. "We're taking things slow, but eventually, yes, we might live together. We might become a different kind of family." "And the mom thing?" Sophie pressed. "That's up to you, sweetheart. You can call me whatever feels right. Aunt Lena, just Lena, or something else. When and if you're ready." Sophie nodded slowly, processing. "Can I still have sleepovers at your house?" "Of course." "And you'll still make me pancakes?" "Always." "And Dad won't be so tired all the time?" Caleb's throat tightened. "I'll try not to be." "Okay." Sophie set down her mug with a decisive thunk. "Then I think it's good. I think Uncle David would think it's good too." She paused. "But Madison's probably going to be really mean about it." "Probably," Caleb agreed. "And other people might say things too. Not nice things. About all of us." "Because they think it's wrong?" "Because they don't understand. But that's their problem, not ours." Sophie straightened in her chair, her expression remarkably fierce for someone who barely reached 4 feet tall. "If Madison says mean stuff, can I tell her it's not her business?" "You can tell her our family is built on love, and that's all that matters," Lena said gently. "And if she keeps being mean, you tell Mrs. Walsh." No more pushing, though, Caleb added. We use words, not hands. Deal? Deal. Sophie grinned, then launched herself across the table into Lena's arms. I'm happy you're going to be my mom. Kind of. Eventually. Lena's eyes filled with tears as she held Sophie tight. I'm happy too, baby. So happy. Caleb watched them, these two people who'd become his entire world, and felt the last piece of resistance crumble. This was right. However complicated, however judged, this was right. The storm arrived on Sunday. Caleb's mother showed up unannounced at 9 in the morning, her face set in the expression she reserved for moral crusades and neighborhood disputes. She didn't knock, just walked straight in like she owned the place, found Caleb making breakfast, and launched immediately into battle. Is it true, she demanded, what Janet Henderson told me after church, that you and that woman are together now? Caleb set down the spatula slowly. If by that woman you mean Lena, then yes, it's true. His mother's face went pale, then red. How could you? Your brother's widow, Caleb, your own brother's wife. My brother's dead, Mom. Has been for 3 years. That doesn't give you the right to move in on his family like some kind of vulture. I didn't move in on anyone. Lena and I developed feelings for each other. It happens. It's shameful is what it is. Disrespectful. A betrayal of everything, David? Don't. Caleb's voice came out harder than intended. Don't bring David into this like you know what he'd want. You barely spoke to him for 2 years before he died because he wouldn't come to your church. That was different. That was about his soul, about you needing to control everyone around you. The words he'd swallowed for years finally broke free. David made his own choices. Lena makes her own choices. I make mine. And none of them require your approval. His mother's hand went to her chest like he'd struck her. I'm your mother. I raised you. I deserve respect. You do. And you'll get it when you show some to the people I love. That woman has manipulated you. Can't you see it? She's been working on you since the funeral, making herself indispensable, playing on your guilt. Stop calling her that woman. Her name is Lena, and she hasn't manipulated anyone. She's been a good friend, a wonderful partner in raising Sophie, and now she's someone I care about deeply. That's all there is to it. And Sophie? What about what this does to Sophie? Growing up in a house of sin, watching her uncle and her father's widow. Sophie is happy, Caleb interrupted. Happier than she's been in years. She's excited about having a real family again. Maybe you should care more about her well-being than your church friends' opinions. His mother drew herself up, her voice going cold. If you continue this relationship, you'll be making a choice between that woman and your family. I've already made my choice. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside, a dog barked. A car drove past. The world kept turning while Caleb's relationship with his mother cracked down the middle. Then I don't know who you are anymore, she said quietly. Maybe you never did. She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her with terrible finality. Caleb stood in the kitchen, his hands shaking, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He'd just burned a bridge he'd spent 28 years walking across. The dutiful son, the one who called every Sunday, who showed up for holidays, who tried so hard to make his parents proud despite never quite succeeding. Gone. All of it gone in one 10-minute conversation. Sophie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. Was that Grandma? Yeah, honey. She sounded mad. She was. Caleb pulled Sophie into a hug, holding her tight. But it's okay. Sometimes grown-ups disagree. Sometimes they disagree so much they need space from each other. Is she mad because of Aunt Lena? She's mad because she doesn't understand, but that's not your problem to fix. Are we still going to see her for holidays and stuff? Caleb's chest ached. I don't know, Soph. Maybe not for a while. Sophie pulled back, looking up at him with concern that no 7-year-old should have to feel. I'm sorry, Dad. This is because of me, isn't it? Because I said I wanted you to be happy? No, baby. This is because of me. Because I finally stood up for what I want, what we all want, and that's never wrong. The lies we tell our children to protect them, Caleb thought. Sophie would understand someday that standing up for yourself often came with a cost, that choosing happiness sometimes meant losing people you loved. But for now, she just needed to know she was safe. The phone rang an hour later. Caleb's father, his voice gruff and uncomfortable. Your mother's upset. I know. Said some things were said that can't be unsaid. That's accurate. A heavy sigh. You're really doing this? With Lena? I am. And you think it's right? After everything? Caleb closed his eyes. His father had always been the quiet one, letting his mother lead the charge while he provided silent support. But sometimes, in rare moments, he showed flashes of independent thought. I think David would want us happy, Dad. I think he'd be glad Lena found someone who loves her, who loves Sophie, who's willing to build a family out of the pieces grief left behind. His father was quiet for a long time. Your mother won't come around easy, maybe not at all. I know. And you're prepared for that? I have to be. Another pause. The girl, Sophie, she's really okay with this? She's more than okay. She's excited. Well, his father cleared his throat. That's something then. Kid's got a good head on her shoulders. It wasn't approval. But it wasn't condemnation either. Caleb would take what he could get. Thanks, Dad. Didn't say I agreed with it. Just said the kid's got sense. A pause. Take care of yourself, son. And that little girl, that's what matters. The line went dead before Caleb could respond. By Monday, the whole town knew. Caleb could feel it the moment he walked into Anderson's hardware. The shift in energy, the sideways glances, the conversations that stopped when he approached. Martin greeted him with careful neutrality, assigning him to inventory in the back where he wouldn't have to interact with customers. At lunch, Jake cornered him by the loading dock. So it's true. You and David's widow? Lena, Caleb said tiredly. Her name is Lena. Yeah, Lena, you're actually together? We are. Jake whistled low. Man, that's complicated. Is there a question in there, or are you just making observations? No judgment, Jake ran a hand through his hair. People are talking, that's all, saying it's weird, that it happened too fast after David. It's been 3 years. I know, but what? How long is acceptable? 5 years? 10? Should we have waited until Sophie graduated high school? Until I was old and alone and had suffered enough to satisfy everyone's sense of propriety? Jake held up his hands. I'm just telling you what people are saying. Thought you'd want to know. I don't. I really don't. Caleb turned to leave, then stopped. You know what the worst part is? Everyone's so busy judging whether it's appropriate that no one's asking if we're happy. If Sophie's happy, if we're building something good, they just care about whether it fits their idea of how grief should look. Are you? Happy, I mean? The question caught Caleb off guard. Yeah, he said quietly. For the first time in 3 years, I actually am. Jake nodded slowly. Then screw what people say. Life's too short to live it according to someone else's rules. It was the first genuinely supportive thing anyone outside of Lena and Sophie had said. Caleb felt something in his chest loosen slightly. Thanks, man. Don't thank me yet. Jennifer Clark's been on a warpath since the school thing. She's telling anyone who'll listen that you're a bad influence on Sophie, that Lena's manipulating you, that someone should call child services. The loosened tension immediately returned. She said, what? It's just talk. But you should know. People like Jennifer, they don't let go of things easy. Caleb drove to Sophie's school that afternoon with his jaw clenched tight enough to hurt. He found Mrs. Walsh in her office, looking harried and uncomfortable. Mr. Moore, I was going to call you this afternoon. About Jennifer Clark? The principal sighed. She's filed a formal complaint. Says Sophie's living environment has become unstable and potentially harmful. Based on what evidence? Based on concerns about your relationship with Ms. Lena Mercer. She's questioning whether Sophie's emotional needs are being met given the complexity of the situation. Caleb forced himself to breathe slowly. Sophie is thriving. Her grades are excellent. She has friends. She's happy. What exactly is the concern? I agree with you, Mr. Moore. I've seen no evidence of neglect or instability, but I'm required to document the complaint and respond appropriately. Which means? Which means I'll need to meet with you and Miss Mercer, observe Sophie in the classroom, Make sure everything is as it should be. Mrs. Walsh's expression softened. This is a formality. I don't anticipate any real issues, but I have to follow protocol. Because a busybody with a grudge filed a complaint based on moral objections rather than actual facts. Unfortunately, yes. Caleb wanted to put his fist through the wall. Instead, he nodded stiffly. When do you need to meet with us? End of the week? Friday afternoon? We'll be here. That night, Caleb sat on the porch long after Sophie went to bed, Lena beside him in the cold. They'd developed this habit over the past few days, sitting together in the darkness, not always talking, just existing in each other's orbit, while the world threw stones. Jennifer's escalating, Caleb said. I heard. Mrs. Walsh called me too. I'm sorry, this is all because of me, because I couldn't just stop. Lena took his hand. This isn't your fault. This is small-town prejudice dressed up as concern. We knew it would be hard. I didn't know it would be this hard. Yes, you did. You were just hoping we'd be wrong. She was right. Part of him had believed that if they were just honest, just good to Sophie, just clearly happy, people would come around. He'd underestimated how much others invested in keeping the bereaved properly bereaved. What if she actually gets somewhere with this? Caleb asked. What if they investigate and decide Sophie's better off somewhere else? They won't, because there's nothing to find except a child who's loved and cared for. Lena squeezed his hand. We're doing everything right, Caleb. We're being honest. We're putting Sophie first. We're not hiding. That has to count for something. In a perfect world, maybe. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in this one. And in this one, we keep going. We show up to that meeting on Friday. We answer their questions. We prove there's nothing wrong here except people's narrow minds. Caleb pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. When did you get so brave? When I decided I was done letting fear win. The meeting on Friday was exactly as uncomfortable as anticipated. Mrs. Walsh asked gentle but probing questions about their relationship timeline, their living arrangements, their plans for the future. She wanted to know how they'd explained the situation to Sophie, how they handled boundaries, whether there had been any signs of confusion or distress. Lena answered with calm honesty. Caleb tried to match her composure and mostly succeeded. They presented a united front. Two adults who cared deeply about a child's well-being and about each other, navigating an unconventional situation with as much grace as possible. Mrs. Walsh took notes, her expression carefully neutral. And Sophie's attitude toward this relationship? How would you characterize it? Enthusiastic, Lena said. Almost annoyingly so. That got a small smile from the principal. She's expressed no concerns, no discomfort. Her biggest concern, Caleb said, is whether Lena will still make chocolate chip pancakes after they officially live together. And will you be living together in the near future? Caleb and Lena exchanged a glance. They hadn't actually discussed this explicitly, had been taking things day by day. Eventually, Lena said, when it makes sense, when we're all ready. And you're confident this relationship is in Sophie's best interest? I'm confident, Caleb said firmly, that Sophie deserves to grow up in a home full of love and honesty, where the adults in her life model healthy relationships, where she sees that life doesn't end with loss, it transforms. We're not replacing her father. We're building something new, something good. Mrs. Walsh set down her pen. Mr. Moore, Ms. Mercer, I want to be clear. I see no evidence of neglect or instability. Sophie is a well-adjusted, happy child. Her academic performance is strong. Her social relationships are healthy. Whatever concerns Mrs. Clark has raised appear to be based on personal moral objections rather than observable fact. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. However, the principal continued, I would encourage you both to be mindful. Children Sophie's age are perceptive. They pick up on adult stress and tension. Make sure you're providing her with consistent messaging and emotional support as this relationship develops. We will, Lena promised. And perhaps consider counseling. Not because there's a problem, but because navigating blended families and grief can be complex. Having professional support might be beneficial. It was a reasonable suggestion. Caleb nodded. We'll look into it. Walking out of the school, Caleb felt lighter than he had in days. They'd cleared the first major hurdle. There would be others: his mother's continued silence, the ongoing town gossip, Jennifer Clark's likely persistence. But they'd proven they could handle it together. That wasn't so bad, Lena said. It was terrible. But we survived. Barely. She laughed, and the sound made something settle in Caleb's chest. This was what mattered. Not what strangers thought, not what former friends whispered. Just this: Lena's hand in his, Sophie waiting at home, a future that finally looked like something worth having. They picked up Sophie together, a small act of defiance and normalcy. She ran out clutching a drawing she'd made in art class, a picture of 3 people holding hands in front of a house. "That's us," she announced proudly. "Our family." Caleb looked at the drawing, at the careful way Sophie had rendered each figure, at the house with its 2 big windows and crooked door. She'd drawn them all the same height, a child's disregard for scale making them equal in importance. "It's perfect," he said, his voice rough. "Can we hang it on the fridge?" "Absolutely." That night, after dinner and homework and the elaborate bedtime routine, Caleb stood in the kitchen staring at Sophie's drawing. 3 figures holding hands, smiling, a family. His phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello? Caleb, it's Father Martin from St. Mary's." Caleb's stomach sank, his mother's priest calling to deliver whatever message she was too angry to deliver herself. "Father, your mother asked me to reach out. She's struggling with your recent choices. I'm aware. She wanted me to counsel you, to help you see that what you're doing is—" "No." Caleb cut him off. "With all due respect, Father, my relationship with Lena isn't up for religious debate. We're 2 consenting adults who care about each other and are doing our best to raise a child right. That's all you need to know. Your mother is concerned about your soul, about Sophie's spiritual welfare. My mother is concerned about appearances, about what the church ladies say. She's more worried about gossip than about whether her granddaughter is happy. That's not fair, Caleb. She loves you. She loves Sophie. Then she has a funny way of showing it." Caleb's grip tightened on the phone. "Tell her this. I'm happy. Sophie's happy. Lena's happy. And if she wants to be part of our lives, she needs to accept that. Not just tolerate it. Accept it. Otherwise, we're done. You're asking her to condone. I'm asking her to love her son unconditionally. Apparently that's too much." He hung up before the priest could respond, his heart hammering. Another bridge burned. Another relationship sacrificed on the altar of his own happiness. But looking at Sophie's drawing, at that crooked house and those 3 smiling figures, Caleb couldn't bring himself to regret it. He'd spent 3 years putting everyone else first. 3 years being the good son, the responsible guardian, the man who never caused problems. He was done with that version of himself. The version that existed now, the one who stood up for what he wanted, who chose love over fear, who believed Sophie deserved to see him happy. That version was better, stronger, more honest. That version was the father Sophie needed. Lena arrived an hour later, let herself in with the key Caleb had given her 2 days ago. Another small step, another declaration of intent. She found him still standing in the kitchen, still staring at the drawing. "You okay?" she asked. "My mother sent her priest to save my soul." "How'd that go?" "I told him we were done unless she accepts us." Completely. Lena wrapped her arms around him from behind, her cheek pressed against his shoulder blade. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time coming. Still hurts, though." "Yeah, it does." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet kitchen, gathering strength for whatever came next. The gossip would continue. The judgment would persist. There would be more Jennifer Clarks, more uncomfortable conversations, more moments of doubt and fear. But they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. Winter came hard that year, arriving early with snow that turned the Wyoming landscape into something both beautiful and unforgiving. Caleb stood at his kitchen window on a Saturday morning in late November, watching ice crystals form patterns on the glass while coffee brewed behind him. 6 months had passed since that morning in the barn, since the decision that had reordered his entire life. 6 months of navigating a relationship while the town watched with varying degrees of disapproval and curiosity. 6 months of Sophie asking increasingly complex questions about what it meant to be a family. 6 months of his mother's continued silence, a void that ached despite Caleb's insistence that he'd made peace with it. But there had been good things too. Lena's laughter filling the spaces that had been quiet for too long. Sunday mornings that felt like joy instead of obligation. Sophie's confidence growing as she watched the adults in her life choose happiness over fear. The coffee maker beeped. Caleb poured 2 cups, added sugar to one, left the other black. Footsteps on the stairs announced Lena's arrival before she appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of his old sweatshirts, her hair a mess, looking more at home in his house than he'd ever seen anyone look. She'd been staying over more frequently lately. Not officially moved in, they were still taking things slow, still conscious of Sophie's adjustment period, but present enough that her toothbrush lived in the bathroom and her favorite tea occupied a shelf in the pantry. "Is she up yet?" Lena asked, accepting the sweetened coffee with a grateful smile. "Haven't heard her. You know how she is on weekends. Sleep until noon if we let her." "We should probably wake her soon. We've got that appointment at 11. The counselor. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a family therapist in the next town over who specialized in blended families and childhood grief. They'd been seeing her for 3 months now, sometimes all together, sometimes just Caleb and Lena, occasionally just Sophie. It was helping, giving them language for the complicated emotions, tools for navigating the judgment and uncertainty. "I'll get her up in a few minutes," Caleb said. "Let her sleep a little longer." They stood together at the window, shoulders touching, watching the snow fall. These quiet moments had become Caleb's favorite. No drama, no decisions, just existing in the same space, comfortable and right. "Jennifer Clark stopped me at the grocery store yesterday," Lena said casually. Caleb tensed. "What did she want?" "To apologize, actually." That caught him off guard. Apologize? Apparently her husband had a conversation with her, told her she was being cruel and judgmental, threatened to take Madison out of her Bible study group if she didn't knock it off. Lena took a sip of coffee. She was pretty awkward about it. Said she'd been overly concerned and perhaps too vocal about things that weren't her business. That's something, I guess. "It's not nothing. She specifically asked me to tell you she was sorry, said she'd been projecting her own marital problems onto us, seeing threats where there weren't any." Caleb processed this. Jennifer Clark, the woman who'd filed complaints and spread gossip, was apologizing. It didn't undo the damage, didn't erase the stress and fear, but it was a crack in the wall of judgment they'd been facing. "Did you accept the apology?" "I told her I appreciated it, and that I hoped Madison and Sophie could move past their issues too." Lena set down her cup. "She's not the enemy, Caleb. She's just a scared, unhappy woman who lashed out at people who seemed to have what she didn't." "When did you get so wise?" "Since I started paying $200 an hour to learn how to process my emotions." She smiled, but there was truth beneath the humor. Dr. Mitchell had helped Lena understand her own journey through grief, had validated her right to love again without guilt. Sophie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, hair sticking up at odd angles. "Are we going to Dr. Sarah's today?" "We are," Caleb confirmed. "After breakfast. What do you want, pancakes or eggs?" "Can Lena make the pancakes?" It was these small moments that reminded Caleb how far they'd come. Sophie asking for Lena specifically, claiming her as a fixture rather than a guest. The easy assumption that Lena would be there for breakfast, for dinner, for all the ordinary moments that made up a life. "I can make pancakes," Lena said, "but you have to help." Sophie grinned and ran to wash her hands, leaving the adults alone again. "She's doing well," Lena said quietly. "Better than I dared hope. Dr. Sarah says kids are resilient, that as long as the adults in their lives are honest and consistent, they adapt faster than we give them credit for. Still, I worry sometimes that we're asking too much of her, that she's just being agreeable because she thinks it's what we need. She's not that good an actress, trust me." Caleb pulled Lena closer. "She's happy, really happy. You can see it." And it was true. Sophie had bloomed over the past months, her confidence growing alongside the stability of their unconventional family. She talked openly about her feelings in therapy, asked questions without fear of upsetting anyone, navigated the remaining social complications at school with remarkable grace. Just last week, she'd come home and announced that she'd told her entire class that her family was different but awesome. When one boy had said it was weird to have your dad date your aunt, Sophie had apparently responded, "It's only weird if you make it weird. They love each other and they love me, and that's what matters." 7 years old and already wiser than most adults. At Dr. Mitchell's office, they settled into the familiar routine. Sophie immediately gravitated to the toy corner while the adults took their usual seats on the comfortable couch. Dr. Mitchell, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an impressive collection of cardigans, greeted them warmly. "How's everyone doing this week?" They went through the updates. Caleb talked about the ongoing silence from his mother, the grief that came in waves despite his conviction that he'd made the right choice. Lena discussed a difficult conversation she'd had with David's parents, who'd initially been supportive but were now expressing concerns about moving on too quickly. Sophie, when called over, reported that Emma's birthday party had been fun and that Madison had actually been nice to her during art class. "That's significant progress," Dr. Mitchell noted. "How did that feel, Sophie? Having Madison be kind after everything that happened?" Sophie shrugged. "It felt okay. I think her mom told her to be nice, but even if it's fake nice, it's better than mean." Very mature perspective. "And your family situation? How's that feeling lately? Any confusion or concerns?" "Nope. It's good. Dad smiles more. Lena makes really good food. I get to have sleepovers at 2 different houses." She counted on her fingers. "The only bad part is Grandma Moore doesn't visit anymore. But Dad says that's her choice, not ours." Dr. Mitchell turned to Caleb. "How are you handling that? Your mother's continued absence?" "Some days better than others," he admitted. "I keep hoping she'll come around, that she'll choose Sophie over her pride. But I can't control what she does. I can only control how I respond." "And how are you responding?" "By being present. By showing Sophie that you don't abandon people you love just because you disagree with their choices. By proving through my actions that family means showing up, even when it's hard." "Do you think your mother is capable of that?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I hope so, but I'm not waiting around to find out anymore." The session continued, touching on the upcoming holidays, the question of Lena officially moving in, the eventual conversations they'd need to have about marriage and permanent commitment. Dr. Mitchell guided them through each topic with practiced ease, helping them articulate fears and hopes, navigate disagreements before they became problems. As they were leaving, she pulled Caleb aside. "You're doing really well. All of you. I know it doesn't always feel that way, but you're building something strong, something that will last." "You think so?" "I know so. I've been doing this for 25 years. I can spot the families that are going to make it." She smiled. "You're going to make it." The words stayed with Caleb as they drove home, as they made lunch, as they settled into the lazy Saturday afternoon routine of movies and popcorn. Sophie fell asleep on the couch between them, her head on Lena's lap, her feet in Caleb's. "We should talk about the holidays," Lena said quietly, not wanting to wake Sophie, dreading it already. "Me too, but we need a plan. Thanksgiving's next week." They'd been avoiding this conversation, both knowing it would be complicated. Lena usually spent Thanksgiving with David's parents. Caleb usually endured an awkward meal with his parents, tension thick enough to cut. Neither option worked now, given the circumstances. "What if we just did our own thing?" Caleb suggested. "The 3 of us. Small and simple." "Your father called me yesterday," Lena said, surprising him. "Asked if there was any way to arrange a meeting. Just him, not your mother. Said he wanted to see Sophie, wanted to talk to both of us." Caleb's chest tightened. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd talk to you, that it was your call." He looked down at Sophie, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the complicated adult negotiations happening above her head. She missed her grandfather. Had asked about him several times, wondering why Grandpa Moore didn't visit anymore when Grandma Moore was the one who was mad. "Just him," Caleb said finally. "No ambushes, no surprise visits from Mom, no sermons or lectures. I'll let him know." They arranged to meet at a diner halfway between their house and his parents' place. Neutral territory. Caleb's father arrived 5 minutes early, looking older than Caleb remembered, his face worn with more than just age. Sophie ran to him immediately, throwing her arms around his waist. "Grandpa!" "Hey there, kiddo." His voice was rough with emotion. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too. Where have you been?" Just taking some time to think about things. He looked over Sophie's head at Caleb and Lena. Can we talk? All of us? They ordered food no one was particularly hungry for and made small talk while Sophie chattered about school and her latest obsession with horses. Finally, when Sophie went to look at the jukebox in the corner, Caleb's father cleared his throat. I owe you both an apology. Been sitting with it for months, trying to find the right words, and I don't think there are any. So I'll just say it straight. I'm sorry for not standing up to your mother, for letting her dictate how our family responds to this, for making you choose between being happy and having your parents in your life. Caleb's throat was too tight to speak. I don't fully understand it, his father continued. Don't know if I ever will. In my day, you didn't, well, you just didn't. But that's my problem, not yours. And watching that little girl over there, seeing how happy she is, how settled, that tells me everything I need to know about whether you're doing right by her. Thank you, Lena said quietly. That means more than you know. Your mother's not coming around. I need you to understand that. She's dug in deep, got her church friends reinforcing her position. But I'm done letting her speak for both of us. He looked directly at Caleb. You're my son. Sophie's my granddaughter. And if this is the family you're building, then I want to be part of it. If you'll have me. The relief was overwhelming. Caleb reached across the table, gripped his father's weathered hand. Of course we'll have you. Thanksgiving's next week. Your mother's going to her sister's. I'd like to spend it with you all, if that's okay. Sophie returned to the table, sensing something important had happened. Grandpa, are you coming to Thanksgiving? If your dad says it's okay, it's more than okay, Caleb managed. Sophie beamed. Can you teach me how to make that stuffing you always make? The kind with the sausage? I can do that. They spent another hour at the diner, the conversation gradually shifting from heavy to normal. Caleb's father asked about Sophie's school, complimented Lena on her patience with what he called this whole complicated situation, told Caleb he was proud of him for standing his ground. It wasn't everything. It wasn't his mother's acceptance or the town's full approval. But it was something. It was one more person choosing love over judgment, choosing presence over absence. Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear. Caleb's father showed up at 9 in the morning with bags of groceries and his grandmother's stuffing recipe written in shaky handwriting on an index card. He and Sophie took over the kitchen, measuring sage and chopping celery, while Caleb and Lena handled the turkey and sides. It was chaotic and imperfect, and nothing like the formal, tense Thanksgivings Caleb had grown up with. Sophie got flour everywhere. The rolls burned slightly. Caleb's father told inappropriate jokes that made Sophie giggle and Lena roll her eyes. It was perfect. They ate in the late afternoon, the table crowded with too much food, sunlight streaming through the windows. Caleb's father said grace, brief and simple, thanking whatever higher power existed for family and second chances and the resilience of children. What are you thankful for, Sophie? He asked. Sophie didn't hesitate. I'm thankful for my family, all of it, even the parts that are weird. Nothing weird about it, Lena said gently. Just different. Different good, Sophie clarified. Not different bad. That night, after Caleb's father had gone home with promises to visit more often, after Sophie had crashed from sugar and excitement, Caleb and Lena sat on the porch despite the cold. The stars were brilliant, the air so clear and sharp it hurt to breathe. I want to ask you something, Lena said. Okay. Move in with me. Officially, both of you. Caleb's heart stumbled. They'd been dancing around this conversation for months, both knowing it was coming but afraid to rush. My house is bigger, Lena continued. Has that extra bedroom Sophie could use for sleepovers when her friends visit. The yard is better, and... She paused. And it's where David and I lived. I need you to be okay with that. Need you to know that having you there isn't erasing him. It's honoring the family he wanted for Sophie, the happiness he'd want for all of us. I'm okay with it, Caleb said. More than okay. But are you sure? Really sure? Because once we do this, we're all in. No more taking it slow. No more separate houses as safety nets. I'm sure. Her hand found his in the darkness. I've been sure since that morning in the barn. Maybe even before. I'm tired of half measures. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want Sophie to have a real home with both of us in it. I want to build a life, Caleb, a real one, together. When? Christmas? Give us a month to prepare Sophie, to make it special, start the new year as a real family. Caleb pulled her close, kissed her under the stars, felt the last piece of fear crumble. Okay, let's do it. They told Sophie the next day. She reacted with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting for this news for months, immediately launching into plans for how to decorate her new room, whether Milo the cat would like having more people around, if she could finally get a dog now that they'd have a bigger yard. We'll discuss the dog, Caleb said, laughing at her transparent negotiation tactics. The next few weeks passed in a blur of packing and planning. Caleb gave notice on his rental, sorted through 3 years of accumulated belongings, decided what to keep and what to leave behind. Some of it was easy: clothes, books, Sophie's toys. Some of it was harder: the furniture he and David had picked out together when Caleb first moved to town, the photos from before everything fell apart. Lena helped him pack, understanding instinctively which items needed gentle handling, which memories required acknowledgement before they could be boxed up and moved forward. On Christmas Eve, they finished moving the last of their belongings. Sophie's room was chaos, boxes everywhere, clothes piled on the bed, toys scattered across the floor. But in the middle of it all, she sat beaming, surrounded by the physical evidence of her new reality. "Can I decorate however I want?" she asked. "Within reason," Caleb said. "What's reason?" "No painting the walls black. No holes in the ceiling, no livestock." Sophie giggled. "I wasn't going to get livestock. Just checking." That night, after Sophie finally fell asleep in her new room, exhausted from excitement and too much hot chocolate, Caleb and Lena stood in the kitchen of what was now their shared home. Boxes still lined the walls, pictures leaned against furniture, waiting to be hung. The whole house had that disorganized, in-between feeling of transition. "We did it," Lena said. "We did. No going back now." "Wouldn't want to." She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Merry Christmas, Caleb Moore." "Merry Christmas." Christmas morning arrived with Sophie bursting into their room at 6:30, demanding they come see what Santa had brought. They stumbled downstairs to find the tree surrounded by presents, the lights twinkling in the pre-dawn darkness. Sophie tore through packages with single-minded focus, books and art supplies and the new bike she'd been begging for. But it was the last present, a small box from Lena, that made her stop and stare. Inside was a silver bracelet with 3 charms: a heart, a house, and the letter S. "The heart is for love," Lena explained. "The house is for family. And the S is for Sophie, for the girl who brought us all together." Sophie threw her arms around Lena's neck. "I love it. I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart." Caleb watched them, his heart full to breaking, and knew with absolute certainty that they'd made it. Despite the judgment, despite the loss, despite every obstacle that had tried to keep them apart, they'd made it. The new year brought its own challenges. Sophie struggled briefly with nightmares about being abandoned, a natural response to the big change despite her outward excitement. They worked through it in therapy, with patience and reassurance and the steady presence of 2 adults who weren't going anywhere. Caleb's mother remained absent, a silence that ached but no longer defined his days. His father visited twice a month, slowly building a relationship with Lena, learning to see her as more than just David's widow. The town gossip faded as newer scandals took its place. Jennifer Clark and her husband separated in February, and suddenly everyone was too focused on that drama to care about Caleb and Lena's unconventional arrangement. By spring, their life had settled into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. Morning coffee together before Sophie woke up, shared responsibilities for school pickups and homework, weekend projects in the garden, teaching Sophie to plant vegetables and pull weeds, movie nights where all 3 of them piled on the couch, arguing about what to watch. The ordinary, beautiful mundanity of being a family. In April, Caleb proposed. Not with fanfare or elaborate planning, just a quiet question on an unremarkable Tuesday evening while they washed dishes together. "Marry me." Lena's hand stilled in the soapy water. "What?" "Marry me. Make this official. Be my wife and Sophie's mom, and the person I get to spend the rest of my life with." "You're serious?" Never been more serious about anything. She dried her hands slowly, turned to face him. Yes. Obviously, yes. They told Sophie at breakfast the next morning. She responded by asking when she could be a flower girl and whether she got to help pick out the dress. We're thinking small, Lena said. Just us, and a few close friends. Can Grandpa Moore come? Of course. And Emma? We'll see. And can I get a dog after the wedding, since we'll be a complete family and everything? Caleb laughed. We'll discuss it. They were married in June in Lena's backyard, under the cottonwood tree where David had proposed to Lena 8 years earlier. It felt right, honoring the past while stepping fully into the future. Caleb's father stood beside him, serving as best man. Sophie, in a dress she'd helped pick out, scattered flower petals with solemn concentration. It was small and simple and perfect. No church, no big reception, no ceremony designed to prove anything to anyone. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of loss, choosing to build something new. Dr. Mitchell officiated, her presence a reminder of the work they'd done to get here. Her words were simple but profound, speaking to the courage it took to love again, to trust again, to believe that happiness wasn't a betrayal of the past, but a gift to the future. Do you, Caleb, take Lena to be your wife? I do. Do you, Lena, take Caleb to be your husband? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. They kissed while Sophie cheered and Caleb's father wiped his eyes, and the few guests they'd invited applauded. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Caleb thought about David, hoped, believed, that his brother was somewhere out there, approving of this moment. The reception was in the same backyard, just cake and champagne and Sophie running around with the other kids who'd been invited. Caleb's father pulled him aside, handed him an envelope. From your mother, he said quietly. Inside was a card, simple and plain, with just a few words written in his mother's careful handwriting. I hope you're happy. That's all I ever really wanted for you. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. Mom. It wasn't a full reconciliation, wasn't an invitation to Sunday dinner or an acknowledgement that she'd been wrong, but it was something. It was a door left slightly ajar, a possibility of eventual healing. Caleb tucked the card into his pocket, feeling the weight of it against his chest. Maybe someday. Maybe his mother would find her way back to them. But if she didn't, they'd still be okay. They'd built something strong enough to withstand absence and judgment and all the complicated emotions that came with choosing happiness over expectation. That night, after the guests had gone home, after Sophie had finally crashed from excitement and sugar, Caleb and Lena sat on the porch steps, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. We did it, Lena said, echoing her words from Christmas Eve. We did. How does it feel? Caleb considered the question. How did it feel to be married, to be part of this family he'd built from grief and hope and stubborn determination? How did it feel to have Sophie asleep upstairs, to have Lena beside him, to have a future that looked like joy instead of just survival? It feels like coming home, he said finally, like I've been wandering for 3 years and finally found my way back. To what? To myself, to the version of me that knows how to be happy, that believes I deserve good things. Lena rested her head on his shoulder. You deserve all the good things, Caleb Moore. So do you. They sat in comfortable silence, letting the night settle around them. Somewhere in the house, Sophie stirred and called out for water. Caleb started to rise, but Lena stopped him. I'll get it. You stay here. He watched her go, this woman who'd become his wife, his partner, his home. Through the window, he could see her checking on Sophie, smoothing back her hair, making sure she was settled. The simple, unremarkable gestures of parenthood and love. This was what he'd been fighting for, this ordinary, beautiful life. This family built not on blood or obligation, but on choice and commitment and the brave decision to begin again. Sophie did eventually get her dog, a rescue puppy they brought home in August, a mutt with floppy ears and too much energy who bonded immediately with Milo in the way that defied all logic about cats and dogs being natural enemies. Sophie named him Chance, declaring that everyone deserved a second chance at happiness, even shelter dogs. The wisdom of children, Caleb thought, watching her play in the yard with her new pet. How they saw the world in such simple, clear terms. Love and be loved. Choose happiness. Give second chances. His mother did eventually reach out 6 months after the wedding. A phone call on a random Tuesday, her voice stiff and formal but present. She asked about Sophie, about how marriage was treating him, skirted carefully around any direct mention of Lena, but didn't actively avoid her either. It was a start. They met for lunch a month later, his mother sitting across from him in a diner, looking smaller and older than he remembered. She asked the right questions, listened to his answers, even smiled when he talked about Sophie's latest school triumph. "She's happy?" his mother asked. "She's happy." "That's good. That's what matters." It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was progress, and Caleb had learned that progress was enough. That healing happened in increments, not grand gestures. By the time Sophie turned 8, their life had found its rhythm. Caleb worked at the hardware store. Lena taught at the elementary school. They took turns with pickup and homework, shared the cooking and cleaning, navigated the small disagreements that came with any marriage with humor and patience. Some days were hard. Grief still showed up unexpectedly, on Sophie's birthday, on the anniversary of David's death, on random Tuesday afternoons when a song on the radio or a smell in the air triggered memories of what they'd lost. But the hard days were balanced by the good ones. By Sophie's laughter, by quiet mornings over coffee, by the ordinary magic of being a family. They'd built something strong and true out of the ruins of loss, proved that love could grow in the most unexpected places. On a Sunday morning in late autumn, Caleb woke to find Lena already up, standing at the bedroom window looking out at the yard where Sophie was playing with Chance. The leaves were turning, the air crisp with the promise of winter. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different this is from what I imagined. When David died, I thought that was it. The end of happiness, the end of family, the end of everything that mattered." She turned to face him. "I was so wrong. You couldn't have known. Neither could you, but you took the risk anyway. You chose to try, even when you were terrified." "We both did." "Yeah, we did." She climbed back into bed beside him. "I'm grateful for that, for your courage, for giving us this life." Through the window, they could hear Sophie laughing, calling for them to come outside and see something Chance had done. The ordinary summons of parenthood, the everyday demands that made up a life. Caleb pulled Lena close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the solid reality of her beside him. This was what mattered. Not the judgment they'd faced or the bridges they'd burned, not his mother's slow acceptance or the town's eventual indifference. Just this family, this home, this imperfect and beautiful life they'd chosen to build together. "Come on," Lena said, pulling him out of bed. "Sophie's waiting." They went downstairs together, stepping out into the crisp autumn morning where their daughter waited with her dog and her joy and her absolute certainty that they would show up when she called. And they did, every time, without fail. Because that's what family meant. Years later, when Sophie was grown and had moved on to her own life, her own adventures, she would tell people about her childhood, about the father who'd stepped up when he didn't have to, who'd chosen courage over fear. About the stepmother who'd loved her as fiercely as any biological parent could. About the unconventional family that had taught her the most important lesson of all, that love wasn't defined by convention or expectation, but by the brave decision to choose each other every single day. But on that autumn morning, she was just a girl playing in the yard calling for her parents, secure in the knowledge that they would come, that they would always come. And they did. Caleb Moore, the single father who'd been too afraid to want anything for himself, stood in the doorway of his home with his wife beside him and his daughter laughing in the yard, and felt the weight of 3 years of fear finally, completely lift.